The night hums like an old refrigerator, steady, apologetic. Emma stands in her loft between a stack of edits and a sink full of quiet dishes when the unknown numbers begin to ring like someone knocking on every door she's ever locked. 10 years is a long time to practice silence. She lets the first call die, then the second. On the third, a voicemail spills through her speaker. Mateo, voice tight with air he can't quite swallow, saying Alma's in the hospital, and he doesn't know if this is the right way to reach her anymore. Emma stares at the ceiling sprinkler as if it's a camera lens that might cut away. She thinks of a kitchen she hasn't stood in since 19, of her father's words flung like nails, of the last good Saturday that smelled of fried dough and skate wax. The fourth call vibrates across the counter and stops. In the silence that follows, a train horn folds into the city's breath, and Emma realizes the past is not calling. It's here, waiting at her door with a suitcase and her name. Morning arrives gray and undecided. Emma sits at the tiny kitchen table with a bowl of cereal, gone soft, replaying Mateo's words until they're memorized like a bad chorus. Daniel knocks, then lets himself in with the key she insisted he keep, a quiet question in his eyes that doesn't ask for more than she can give. He moves through the room carefully, as if the floorboards are mapped with tripwires, and makes coffee like a liturgy. They talk around the center, orbiting Alma's name, the hospital, the 10 years. He says he'll back her choice either way, go or don't, because love isn't leverage. She nods, grateful and irritated at once, because neutrality can feel like distance when you want someone to pick a side you haven't picked yet. The kettle sings again. Emma looks at the door, the phone, the shoebox she did not open, and feels the old house key she never returned like a coin burning her palm. Across town, fluorescent light bleaches the hospital corridor to the color of old paper. Gabriel waits outside Alma's room with a styrofoam cup, cooling in his hands, replaying versions of the past that can no longer be rearranged. He pictures Emma at 19, shoulders squared, eyes bright with a future he mistook for disobedience. The phone in his pocket lists 10 years of calls that never landed, a ledger of reach and recoil. He wants to walk into Alma's room and promise that he can fix this like a porch or a roof. Something measurable. But words are drywall that can hide rot. He knows that now. He closes his eyes and sees a star-shaped sign buzzing to life. And in that vision he hears a sentence. No excuses. No diagrams. Short enough to carry and heavy enough to mean something. Emma chooses the safest time to not be seen and still show up after visiting hours. When the hospital hums softer and security yawns, she slips through like a rumor, bouquet in a grocery sleeve, and leaves flowers at Alma's bedside with a folded note that only says, "Star." In the hallway, footsteps approach. She ducks into a stairwell and watches Sophia pass, shoulders carrying the weight of a decade like a stack of thin plates. Emma feels both older and suddenly 9, the age when a grandmother's kitchen could heal most things. She waits until the elevator dings and empties before she steps back out, then traces the outline of the neon star in her mind like a map home she can't admit she knows by heart. On her way out, the night breathes cold against Emma's face, the kind of cold that sharpens edges. She cuts through a side street to avoid the main entrance and stops. When a bulletin board stops her flyers layered like shed skins, lost cats, guitar lessons, a blood drive, pinned beside a single sheet in careful handwriting announcing a grand reopening Sandrite, TBA, the font of the star looks exactly right. Mrs. Ly's tea shop window across the street glows a soft, forgiving amber. Emma takes a photo of the flyer and doesn't realize her hands are shaking until the image blurs. The city exhales a train again, farther off this time. She pockets the phone, pulls her jacket close, and walks into the quiet. Not ready to call, but no longer pretending she can't hear. The office is a repurposed warehouse with windows like picture frames for other people's lives. Emma slides into her chair before the rest of the team arrives, queuing up rough cuts that don't ask her for anything except attention. Priya arrives with a paper bag that smells like cardamom and relief, sets it down, and waits, because real friends let silence do its first job. Emma says she's fine in the voice people use when they are not. Priya doesn't press. She drifts to the monitor, watches a clip of teenagers painting a wall the color of their hopes, and asks if Emma intends to keep rebuilding strangers' stories while letting her own collapse off screen. Emma says it's not collapsing, it's contained. Priya says containment is just a story we tell when the lid is heavy. The room hums with fluorescent insistence. Emma laughs once, too sharp, then admits she went to the hospital at night like a thief. Priya nods, then asks the only question that matters. Okay? What now? The past doesn't arrive as a single reel. It rushes in fragments. Emma scrubs a timeline where there should be someone else's story, but the monitor ghosts with her own: a kitchen at 19, a slammed drawer, the word pre-med breaking like a plate. She remembers the way Gabriel's voice rose not to hurt but to hold, and how holding can feel like strangling when you're carved for flight. Sophia's hands fluttered. Translators without language. Mateo's backpack in the corner like a witness. Emma kept her face a ledger: credits and debts, none forgiven. The argument was not original. Too ordinary to ruin a decade, and that ordinariness is what still stings. Pride is cheap and durable. You can build a house with it, and wake one day to find there are no doors. Emma pauses the screen on a frame that could be any family anywhere: a father pointing, a daughter braced, a mother trying to splice them in. She breathes, presses spacebar, lets it play, then stops it again, as if repetition could change the ending. Gabriel unlocks the hall closet as if it might bark. The boxes inside are labeled with years that wouldn't answer him. Birthdays he tried to keep on the calendar, as if the ritual could hold shape without the person. He sets them on the table one by one, opens a lid to tissue paper, and a pair of rainbow laces he never gave. Another lit a field recorder for a film program he swore she wouldn't attend. He lifts the stack of returned envelopes, stamped undeliverable. A snowfall of refusal with his own handwriting inside, too careful, like neat boards, overwrought. He wants to be angry at the postmark, at the rules, at the systems that obeyed the block, but he knows where responsibility lies. He sits, rubs the leather watchband, imagines a sentence small enough to get past a locked door. When he stands, he carries the smallest box to the front seat of his old sedan. The seatbelt clicks. Some gifts arrive late. The question is whether they're still gifts when the season has changed. Sophia records the message 3 times and keeps none. Version 1 is logistics, visiting hours, room number, the nurse's name, as if information could be a bridge where feeling fails. Version 2 is apology that keeps detouring into justification, which is not apology at all. Version 3 is just Sophia breathing. Silver locket, cold against her palm, the sound of a woman who watched storms because she thought sheltering might make him weak, not knowing that thunder lands, whether you explain it or not. She opens the photo on her phone where Emma is 9 and beaming, flour on her cheeks, Alma's hands shaping dough beside her. Sophia speaks to that child because it's easier. You were never a test I had to pass. She stops the recording before the words can betray her and names the file draft, which is at least honest. Through the window, the afternoon lifts into a softer light, as if the day believes a gentler hour is always possible. Mrs. Lee's tea shop smells like orange peel and old wood, the kind of place where conversations don't have to shout to be heard. Gabriel arrives with the small box he chose, awkward in the doorway like a man who forgot how rooms work. Mrs. Lee pours without asking his preference, which is its own kindness, and sets the cup where his hand will find. She listens as he circles the confession, nodding with the gravity of someone who has watched many people burn and rebuild. If you're going to speak, she says finally, build a sentence, not a speech. He laughs once, pained, and repeats the line until it becomes a measure. The bell above the door clinks as a boy purchases jasmine candy. Life keeps walking through. Gabriel opens the box, shows the rainbow laces, the way he plans to lace them through a sign that will hum again. Mrs. Lee approves with a small smile that could hold a city. Some sentences require a stage, she says. Some only ask for a doorbell and tea. The lock on Starlight gives way with a sigh. Like a building relieved to be believed in again. Gabriel stands at the threshold where his children once wobbled toward balance, and the air greets him with damp and dust and the faintest thread of old sugar, as if memory has a scent that refuses eviction. The rink is a moonlit plain under a broken skylight, its boards scabbed and its rails bleeding rust. He tests the floor with his boot and feels both the give of rot and the miracle of what remains. He catalogs the work the way builders do: tear out sister beams, lay new subfloor, sand, seal wire, relight. But his hands don't stop at lumber. They reach for the thing beneath a sentence he can build with sweat when words have failed. He imagines Emma here, not as a forgiveness he deserves, but as a possibility the city deserves. He touches the dead neon star on the wall and promises it current, then whispers the apology he's been practicing. Short, bare, and heavy, into a room that keeps secrets. Money is a language he speaks fluently in scarcity. Gabriel lists what can be sold and what must be kept, then chooses. The truck goes. He cleans it like a ritual, vacuums sand from summers long gone, oils the dash until it shines the way. It did the day he promised to bring the kids for donuts and laps if everyone survived the week. He shakes a buyer's hand, counts cash folded soft with use, and does not flinch when the taillights disappear like two small hearts receding. Nights, he takes side jobs under the harsh glare of portable lamps, patching a buckled deck, replacing a storm door, fixing a gutter that weeps red clay onto pale siding. He hires 2 old crewmates by the week. No speeches, just envelopes that arrive on Fridays. Each task tightens a loop around the rink in his mind. Back at Starlight, he stacks lumber with labels, a quiet orchestra waiting for its cue, and tucks a pair of rainbow laces into his pocket like a talisman that believes in him. Work becomes a metronome that steadies what remorse can't. Morning, he pries up boards and hears the groan of nails confessing their fatigue. Noon, the sander growls across new maple, raising a sweet, bright scent that turns the old air hospitable. Afternoon, rain hammers the patched roof. He waits it out under tarps, palms spread to feel for leaks like a doctor listening for murmurs. When clear, he threads new wire through conduits with the patience of someone untangling a decade. He rewinds the neon transformer. Brushes rust from handrails until they gleam like they remember their job, and paints the cinder block wall a defiant teal that refuses the gray. He eats from a lunch pail balanced on a paint bucket and leaves the radio low to a station that plays songs she loved before they argued about futures. He is building a place for strangers, yes, but also a sentence without adjectives, poured into joists and screws, that will stand when his voice fails. When the room is too loud with achievements, Gabriel steps into the quiet of the mezzanine and takes out the old flip phone he never learned to abandon. The camera stares without judgment. He tries versions, each shorter than the last. I was afraid you'd fall. I made falling a crime. I broke the bridge. He deletes them. All the words that still try to bargain. He thinks of Alma's hands kneading dough, of Sophia's locket warmed by the pulse beneath it, of Mateo's look the night of the crash, hurt and loyal at once. He records again, this time speaking to the shadow at the far end of the rink as if Emma is there, unamused and listening. I mistook fear for love, he says. I am done mistaking. The sentence lands in the phone like a small, complete thing. He saves it and doesn't send it. Not yet. A good beam needs time to cure before it carries weight. Paperwork is less romantic than neon, but it is how dreams become public property. Gabriel meets a folding table he's dragged to center rink with a neat stack of forms. Transfer intent, charitable designation, maintenance covenants that will outlast him. He reads every line. A man who has signed too quickly before. The nonprofit's name sits where a deed used to belong to a family Saturday. And he writes Emma's name in the dedication field with a slowness that honors both absence and hope. He imagines city kids learning to fall safely on wheels, then learning to stand behind cameras on the mezzanine. Stories catching light where quiet once pooled. Pen lifted, he feels something shift, ownership shedding like a heavy coat. He closes the folder, slides it into a courier envelope, and sets it beside the rainbow laces. The room is still. The star is dark. Both will change, one with ink and the other with current, and neither will ask her for forgiveness to function. Hospitals learn your footsteps. Emma can tell by the way the night guard only nods now. Alma's chart shows numbers that loosen the fist in her chest, and the doctor's voice is measured hope, which is the best kind. She brings fresher flowers this time, not the grocery sleeve, but a small wrapped bundle from a bodega that still believes in paper and twine. On her way out, she nearly collides with Mateo, the same wide smile that used to rescue holidays, only thinner at the edges. They freeze. Two magnets testing their poles. He says her name like a password he wasn't sure still worked. She says his like a question that remembers the answer. There's a quick exchange about Alma, stable, sleeping, stubborn still. And then a silence that asks for more room than the corridor can give. He reaches as if to hug and thinks better of it. She mirrors him. They laugh at their own choreography, a little broken and still somehow in time. Before they part, he says, "You should see what's happening across the river." She pretends not to understand. He doesn't press. The elevator car is an old one, the kind that hums like a throat clearing. Emma enters as the doors yawn and finds Sophia already inside, clutching a paper cup of tea. They each move to opposite corners because rituals don't vanish. They just grow quieter. Floor numbers blink up in amber, a slow metronome. Sophia's locket catches the light and swings once, a small pendulum measuring what neither says. Emma counts breaths and remembers, Sophia's hands hovering during fights like birds looking for a branch. Sophia's eyes lift, wanting to begin with logistics again. How long they'll keep Alma, what the doctor said about sodium. But she swallows it and tries a sentence with no hinges. "I'm glad you came." Emma nods because her throat is a locked drawer. The elevator stops between floors for a heartbeat, the way memories sometimes snag. When it jolts onward, both exhale. At the lobby, doors open to cold air and possibility. They step out without touching. Still, the distance feels different, measured, mapped, not infinite. At the end of third period, Daniel erases a board full of fractions and reminds himself that most problems allow more than one path home. A student lingers. Aliyah, the one who sketches shoes in the margins and gets perfect scores anyway. She asks if he's coming to the unveiling on Saturday, says her cousin's crew has been working nights on some old place that used to smell like sugar and wax. Daniel smiles at the coded description and asks what the place is called. She shrugs theatrically. Mystery makes everything taste better, and says the man running it hired neighbors who couldn't get hired anywhere else, paid cash, no speeches. Daniel feels the shape of a suspicion he won't name, the outline of a neon star he's never seen but has heard in Emma's stories, told sideways. He promises to come with his fiancée, the word feeling both certain and gentle in his mouth. After she leaves, he writes, "Saturday. Community project," in neat letters. The way he writes anything he hopes will matter. Emma takes the long way home, and somehow the road makes a decision for her. The river is a sheet of pewter. The warehouses along it look like they're holding their breath. She turns down a side street, and there it is starlight with its doors propped open, inside lights like a ribcage newly wired. Two guys shoulder lumber through the frame, joking in the shorthand of people who have learned to trust. She doesn't go closer. She watches from across the street, half hidden by a stack of pallets that smell like wet pine. Then she sees it in the window. Kid-sized roller skates with rainbow laces. Her laces are a perfect twin. The sight hits like a name spoken after a decade. She reaches for her phone, zooms in, and catches her own reflection in the glass, older and softer, and still braced. A worker notices her and nods with ordinary kindness, as if to say, "You're allowed to stand here." She nods back, a private acknowledgement, and steps away before curiosity becomes contact. The bell on Mrs. Lee's door sounds like something small and brave. Emma enters because sometimes you need a stranger who knows you only by your face. Mrs. Lee pours tea with practiced grace and slides a cup across the counter as if they've been meeting here for years. No ceremony, just steam lifting into a room that forgives how hard it is to speak. Emma admits she saw the rink open and did not go in. Mrs. Lee nods like a teacher whose student has named a fear correctly. "Some doors open best from both sides," she says, and the sentence lands with the weight of a simple tool that anyone can use. They stand in the quiet, the tea cooling to perfect. Emma asks, almost shy, who's behind it all. Mrs. Shy, who's behind it all. Lee only smiles into her cup and says, "Someone learning the difference between a speech and a sentence." Emma looks at the street, where the evening collects itself. She doesn't turn the cup's handle toward the door, but she doesn't turn it away either. By dusk, the block is a river of winter coats and expectant breath. The kind of gathering that makes a city feel like it remembers its own name. A drumline from the high school tests a rhythm, then yields to the hush that travels outward as the switch is thrown. The neon star coughs once, twice, and blooms, electric teal rimmed in warm amber, casting everyone in the colors of a forgiven photograph. Emma stands near the back, half screened by shoulders, pretending anonymity is protection. Sophia and Matteo arrive separate from Gabriel, separate from each other, separate from her, all of them orbiting the same glowing nucleus. Inside, the floor gleams like a promise sanded smooth. A banner reads Steinturlite, "Welcome home." The star printed slightly off register, which makes it feel human. The mic squeals, settles. Mrs. Lee steps to it and thanks the donors with the soft authority of a person who knows precisely how much tea it takes to steady a shaking day. Emma swallows. The star hums like an organ. Testimonies begin like small stones, dropped into deep water. Luis from the crew, who once couldn't get a foreman to return a call, tells how a guy named Gabe paid cash on Fridays and brought hot sandwiches when the wind cut through gloves. A grandmother with a cane says her grandson learned how to measure twice, and cut once, and stopped measuring himself against the worst thing he'd done. Daniel, surprised to find his name on the program, is nudged forward by a row of his students. He speaks about spaces where kids can risk falling without punishment. How falling is the secret curriculum of becoming. Each voice arcs toward a center no one names. Emma feels defensive anger pawing at its leash. Good works are not apologies, she reminds herself. But something in the modest way the stories land won't let her file them under performance. They sound like building, not burning. She finds her breathing changing with the crowds, sensing to a tempo older than grievance. Somewhere behind the curtain, boards creak. The stories taper and the mic waits like a held hand. Gabriel steps from the doorway to the stage, with the careful gait of a man approaching a thing he's already broken once. No music cues him. The drumline is quiet, the crowd quieter. He looks older under the lights, not diminished, just true. He grips the sides of the lectern as if it might take flight, then abandons it, standing bare to the night and its recording phones. He does not search for Emma's face. He has forfeited the right to speak to her through a crowd. He breathes once, twice, and releases the sentence he has been curing for months like lumber, stacked under a dry roof. I mistook fear for love. I am done mistaking. The line lands compact and heavy. A beam set in fresh joists. He does not explain it. He does not stitch his history to it. He simply nods to the work behind him as if to say, I have learned where words end and wood begins. A city clerk in an orange scarf steps up with a slim folder. The page inside is the hinge on which an old Saturday can turn. Gabriel takes the pen, and for once reads every line again, even though he knows them by heart. He signs, then steps aside so the clerk can announce what the paper means in words that fit in a press release. The Starlight Rink has been donated to a youth arts nonprofit with a dedication in honor of Emma Reyes. The crowd inhales as if the temperature has shifted. Mrs. Lee rings a tiny brass bell from the counter she's dragged out front. The clear note threads the murmur. Emma's name hangs in the cold, like a constellation briefly legible. She feels fury spark. Public gestures can be a trap, but it competes with a tenderness that ambushes her at the sight of the rainbow laces threaded through the podium rail. The star hums louder, or maybe that's just the city, gathering itself around a thing that belongs to more people than it did yesterday. Sound thins in Emma's ears the way it does before you pass out or tell the truth. Applause happens without her. Her body stays still while her mind runs laps on an empty rink. She sees 19-year-old her, the slammed door, the crash no one talks about, the decade of birthdays she skipped like stones thrown too hard. She hears the sentence again and tests it for leaks. It holds. Not as absolution, but as a foundation that does not wobble when pushed. Daniel's hand finds the small of her back and does not steer. Sophia starts toward her, stops, starts again. Mateo watches both and stays put, a hinge waiting to be used. Emma takes one breath so deep it surprises her ribs and lets herself feel both the anger and the ache and the grief for a family that might have been and might have been and might still be something else. She doesn't step forward. She doesn't run. She simply lifts her chin toward the stage and allows the moment to be as big as it is. After the crowd thins and the neon hum softens to something like breath, Emma steps onto the polished floor that once taught her how to fall safely. The room returns the sound of her wheels with a careful echo, the way a friend repeats your words to prove they were heard. Gabriel stands at center rink without skates. Palms open, a man who knows wood and weight and not much else tonight. She circles once, slow, not to taunt, but to measure the distance between what was said and what can be lived. He begins with her name and stops, then tries again with the sentence she already knows, not as performance, but as practice. She tells him that sentences are beginnings, and that beginnings do not erase endings already written. He nods, not arguing. She names the crash after the fight, how it turned anger into a superstition that kept her from touching doorknobs with his name on them. He says he remembers every mile of that night, and that remembering is not the same as repairing. The rink listens and keeps their balance for them. Sophia's footsteps arrive before her voice, a soft, quick rhythm that once meant dinner was ready and storms were passing. Mateo follows with his careful brightness, the kind that checks every face before turning on fully. Emma does not turn away. She says she is not here for reunions staged like curtain calls. She is here to understand what repair might cost and who will pay it. Sophia speaks first and admits that silence was a vote cast daily for 10 years. Mateo tells the story of being the kid in the passenger seat who learned how to hold his father's shame without dropping it. Gabriel does not reach for anyone. Emma says each of them has a piece of the door, and that the door only swings if all hands lift. She does not raise her voice. She lays out the simple inventory of harm and the ledger of effort that must follow. The air in the rink changes shape. Less cold, still exacting. Outside, the city wind knocks once at the propped doors and then, as if instructed, waits. Emma does what editors do. She proposes structure. No surprise visits, no conversations that begin on stages and end in scripts others write. A therapist who does not know their history except what they bring weekly, with missed sessions counted as real setbacks, not shrugged excuses. Boundaries drawn like railings, not cages if Gabriel feels the urge to fix with gifts. He names it first. If Sophia reaches for logistics when feeling is required, she pauses until feeling arrives. If Matteo starts translating for everyone, he steps back and speaks for himself. Emma promises to open the letters when she is ready and not before, and that their meaning will be hers to assign. She says her love is not a faucet that anyone can twist, and that forgiveness, if it comes, will be quiet and late and earned. No one applauds. They agree out loud in the slow voices of people who have finally found the right contract. Somewhere overhead a relay clicks, and the neon steadies from flicker to constant. When the others drift toward the lobby, Gabriel stays and reaches beneath the bleachers for a small corrugated box with a careful lid. The box makes a sound like dry leaves when he sets it down, and inside is a decade of his handwriting, with the politeness of stamped refusals. He does not offer them the way a man offers proof. He places the box between them like a weight, meant to hold something steady. He says there are apologies inside, bad ones and better ones, and stories about the days he almost called and did not, and notes on wood and wiring that sounded like sermons until he learned to make them simple. Emma touches the lid, not lifting it, and feels the years push back through the cardboard. She tells him the past is not a scrapbook she needs to display. It is a record she will listen to when she can bear the sound. He nods. The sentence, again quiet now, is less a line than a plank they both step onto. It is Emma who suggests one lap. Not a ceremony, not a symbol, just practice. She tightens her laces and stands the way her grandmother taught her, knees soft, eyes up, arms loose like doors on good hinges. Gabriel steps into a pair of rental skates with comic caution and earns a quiet laugh that does not wound. They move along the rail, not touching, the room offering them lines to hold and light to follow. Sophia and Matteo watch from the mezzanine, not referees, only witnesses. The first few feet are clumsy, then the body remembers what the mind argued against. Emma does not outpace him. He does not reach for her. The star hums and throws their shadows ahead, as if the future could be scouted for hazards. At the far curve, they pause and stand in their own breath, without filling the silence with promises. The lap remains unfinished on purpose, a sentence with room for the next word, something small and true that will not require applause to stand. Morning pours into starlight, like a promise that remembered how to keep itself. The rink floor thrums with small wheels and larger hopes, and on the mezzanine, Emma sets a tripod with the same care she once reserved for armoring her heart. She teaches a dozen kids to frame a face without stealing it, to let silence breathe between questions, to find the star in a scene without forcing the light. Below, Gabriel tightens a rail he's already tightened, twice, because maintenance is what love looks like when the speeches are over. Sophia sorts donated knee pads by size, her locket tapping a soft metronome against her chest. Matteo runs a beginner skate circle that keeps collapsing into laughter and then reforming, the physics of community learned in real time. Emma watches her class catch a moment, two strangers steadying each other at the turn, and realizes the camera is not for proof. It's for witness. She presses record, aware that beginnings, when tended, can become middles without asking anyone's permission. Therapy is a room with chairs arranged to admit defeat and practice grace. There is no neon, just a ficus that has survived other families and framed degrees that promise process, not miracles. Emma learns to say, "I felt small," instead of, "You made me small." Gabriel discovers that listening without building is a craft harder than carpentry. Sophia admits the relief of logistics was a way to dodge the mess that made language honest. Matteo finds the shape of his own story outside the function of translator, his voice lower when it is only his. The work is not cinematic. Thursdays arrive, and sometimes they leave with nothing but homework, write the memory without adjectives, say the sentence without defending it, breathe through the minute when the old script begs for a cameo. They fail like students and pass like survivors. In the parking lot, after one session that scraped bone, they stand in a loose cluster and decide where to eat. Ordinary hunger leading them gently back to the world. The wedding is small on purpose and large by accident. Word traveled the way joy does in neighborhoods with open windows, and now starlight gleams like a second chance dressed in white lights. Daniel waits beneath the neon star that hums a key even the shy can sing. Emma walks the length of Maple with no aisle runner, escorted by the music of wheels and the smell of sugared dough someone insisted upon for tradition. Alma arrives to a standing cheer, dignified in a floral shawl, settling into a front row chair as if she's returning to her own living room. Vows are short, the way true things are. Promises to keep the floor smooth, to mend rails, to offer hands not as rescue, but as balance. Gabriel signs the license as a witness, not a headline, his signature smaller than the deed he once signed. When the officiant pronounces, the room doesn't erupt, it exhales, the sound of a building learning a new use for old walls. There is no official father-daughter dance, only applause that becomes one. After the toast about how falling is part of learning, Emma wheels to the edge where Gabriel stands with his shoes in his hand, like a man who brought the wrong equipment to the right day. She doesn't ask, and he doesn't offer. They step onto the floor as if onto a memory that has forgiven them for leaving. The music is low, something with a heartbeat hiding in it. And they move in parallel, hands not touching, eyes occasionally meeting like signals flashed across a safe distance. He mouths the sentence once, not for effect, but to steady his feet. She nods as if to say, yes, keep it simple. Around them, guests keep their conversations soft, the way people do when a wild thing wanders into the yard and everyone wants it to stay. One slow lap later, they stop where they began. No crescendo, only breath and light and a shared unshowy relief. Night later, the rink asleep, Emma sits by the loft window with a fleece around her shoulders and a phone that weighs less than the decision inside it. The letters weigh in their box like a choir holding a single, unbroken note. She opens her contacts and scrolls to the names that once lived behind a wall she built at 19, brick by brick, for reasons she would not dishonor by pretending were small. Boundaries, she has learned, are not gates meant to keep love out. They are rails that let love travel safely at speed. She unblocks 2 numbers. The phone does not ring. No trumpets unroll. She types boundaries stay. So does my love. She adds nothing else because nothing else fits the truth without bending it. Across the room, Daniel sleeps, the kind of sleep that trusts the house to stand. Emma sets the phone face down, hears a train fold the city into one long exhale, and lets the future arrive like weather. Uncertain, necessary, hers.